The pain in my chest started as a dull throb, like a heavy book resting on my ribs, but within an hour, it felt like an elephant was sitting on me. I was alone in the house I had lived in for 40 years, the house where I raised my only son, Mark. I tried to stand up to reach the phone on the kitchen counter, but my knees buckled. I fell to the linoleum floor, gasping for air. It wasn't the pain that scared me the most, it was the silence. There was no one there to catch me. I managed to crawl to the phone and dialed Mark's number. He picked up on the third ring, his voice sharp and impatient. "Mom? I'm in a meeting. This better be important." I wheezed into the receiver. "Mark? Chest pain. Help." There was a pause, and for a terrifying second I thought he might hang up. Then he sighed, a sound of pure inconvenience. "Fine. I'm calling 911. I'll meet you there. But Mom, if this is just indigestion again, I am going to be furious." The line went dead. I lay on the floor, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, waiting for the sirens, and feeling a different kind of heartbreak. The ambulance ride was a blur of lights and noises. The paramedics were kind, holding my hand and telling me to stay with them, which was more affection than I had received from my own family in years. When we arrived at the hospital, they rushed me into the emergency room. Doctors swarmed around me, attaching wires to my chest and inserting N4 into my arm. It was chaotic and terrifying, but my mind was focused on the door, waiting for Mark. He arrived 40 minutes later. He wasn't running. He was walking slowly, checking his expensive watch, looking like he was strolling through a shopping mall rather than an ER. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car, and his hair was perfectly gelled. He stood at the foot of my bed, not looking at my face, but at the monitor beeping beside me. "So," he asked the nurse, "is she dying?" The nurse looked shocked by his tone. "Your mother is stabilizing, sir, but she has a severe blockage. We need to run tests." Mark rolled his eyes. "Great. Tests? That sounds expensive." The tests revealed that I needed an angioplasty immediately. The blockage was severe, and without surgery, my heart wouldn't last another week. The doctor, a young man with tired eyes named Dr. Evans, explained the procedure to us. "It is routine but necessary," he said. "We need to get her upstairs to the cardiac unit right away." I felt a wave of relief. There was a solution. I wasn't going to die today. But then came the reality check. A woman from the billing department walked in. She was carrying a clipboard and had a kind but firm face. Her name tag read Mrs. Higgins. She looked at Mark, then at me. "Mrs. Vance," she said gently, "I see here that your primary insurance has a very high deductible, and because this is a specialized private cardiac center, we require a guarantor to sign for the balance before admission. The estimated out-of-pocket cost is roughly $15,000. The room went silent. I looked at Mark. He was the CEO of a tech startup. He had just bought a boat. $15,000 was nothing to him. "I can't pay that," I whispered, shame burning my cheeks. "I live on my pension. I don't have that kind of savings." I looked at my son, my eyes pleading. "Mark, can you help me? I can pay you back slowly. $50 a month." I knew it would take me the rest of my life to pay him back, but I didn't want to die. I wanted to see my grandchildren, even if Mark rarely brought them around. Mark laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. $50 a month? Mom, be serious. You're 72. You don't have enough months left to pay that off. He turned to Mrs. Higgins. "I am not signing anything. My finances are tied up in investments. I am not going to be liable for her bad planning. She should have had better insurance." Mrs. Higgins blinked, clearly taken aback. "Sir, without a guarantor or a deposit, we might have to transfer her to the county hospital. That transport could be dangerous in her condition." Mark shrugged, adjusting his silk tie. "That's not my problem. She's an adult. She can figure it out." "Mark, please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I'm your mother. I paid for your college. I sold Dad's car to pay for your first apartment. Please." Mark looked at me with pure disgust. "That was your job, Mom. You don't get a medal for doing what parents are supposed to do. Look, I have a dinner reservation at 7. I can't deal with this drama." He turned to Mrs. Higgins. "If she can't pay, ship her out. I am strictly here as a visitor. Do not put my name on any billing paperwork. Do you understand? Mrs. Higgins tightened her grip on the clipboard, her knuckles turning white. I understand perfectly, sir. You are refusing financial responsibility. In writing, Mark said. Give me a form. I want to formally declare that I am not paying a dime. He was so eager to distance himself from me. He wanted it on record that he didn't care if I lived or died, as long as it didn't cost him money. Mrs. Higgins handed him a waiver of liability form. Mark signed it with a flourish, pressing the pen hard into the paper. There, he said, handing it back. Now I'm leaving. Mom, call me when you end up at the county hospital. I might visit next week. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He didn't squeeze my hand. He just turned on his heel and walked out of the room, the sound of his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking on the tile floor echoing in the silence he left behind. I felt something break inside me, and it wasn't my heart this time. It was my spirit. I lay back against the pillows, sobbing quietly. I had raised a monster. I had poured all my love into him, and he had turned into a block of ice. Mrs. Higgins stood by the bed. She didn't leave. She waited until Mark was gone. Then she stepped closer. She put a hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Vance, she said softly. I am so sorry. That was incredibly difficult to watch. I have to go to the county hospital, I choked out. Please just call the transport. I don't want to be a burden. Mrs. Higgins shook her head slowly. She had a strange look in her eyes, a mix of pity and sudden sharp calculation. Let's not be hasty, Eleanor. May I call you Eleanor? I nodded. I'm going to look at your file again. Sometimes things are missed. Sometimes, there are old policies linked to Social Security numbers that don't pop up immediately. She pulled a tablet out of her pocket and started tapping on it furiously. You said your late husband worked for the city, correct? She asked. Yes, I sniffled. He was a sanitation supervisor for 30 years. Mrs. Higgins hummed. The city used to have a catastrophic coverage plan for senior employees. It was discontinued in 1995, but existing employees were grandfathered in. It's rare, so we don't usually check for it first. She kept tapping, her eyebrows knitting together. Then her eyes went wide. Oh, Mrs. Higgins whispered. Oh my. She looked at me, a smile slowly spreading across her face. Eleanor, did you know your husband opted into the Legacy Gold Plan back in 1989? I don't know, I said. He handled all the paperwork. I just signed where he told me. Well, Mrs. Higgins said, her voice trembling with excitement. He did. And this policy is aggressive. It was designed before insurance companies started cutting corners. It covers 100% of all cardiac procedures at any private facility. Zero deductible. Zero copay. I gasped. Really? So I can stay, you can stay, she confirmed. But there is something else. A rider attached to the policy. It's called the Caregiver Indemnity Clause. It was meant to compensate family members who had to miss work to sign admission papers and care for the patient. Mrs. Higgins tapped the screen again. Because your husband died in the line of duty, it says here he had a stroke on the job, the payout for this clause was tripled. It's a flat inconvenience fee paid to the person who signs as the responsible party for the admission. She looked at the door where Mark had just exited. Usually, this money goes to the next of kin who takes responsibility for the bill. It's meant to offset the cost of the deductible and time off. How much is it? I asked, confused. Because Mark refused to sign. Mrs. Higgins looked at me, her eyes twinkling. The clause pays out a lump sum of $250,000. It was an old incentive to ensure families didn't abandon their elders in state care. The insurance company has a massive surplus in this fund, because nobody claims it anymore. My jaw dropped. $250,000? And Mark had just walked away from it. But Mark didn't sign, I said, the realization dawning on me. He signed a waiver. He specifically refused responsibility. Exactly, Mrs. Higgins said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He legally severed his connection to this admission, which means he is ineligible for the indemnity payment. She looked at me. Eleanor, do you have anyone else? A friend? A neighbor? Someone who helped you get here. I thought about it. My neighbor, Susan. She didn't bring me, but she watches my cat. She checks on me every day. She's the one who told me to call Mark when I felt sick. Mrs. Higgins nodded. Does Susan want to sign as your responsible party? She doesn't have to pay anything, remember? The insurance covers the bill. She just has to sign the paper saying she is your advocate. I can call her, I said. She's retired. She could use the help, though she would never ask. I called Susan immediately. She was frantic with worry when she answered. Eleanor. I saw the ambulance. Are you okay? Where is Mark? I'm okay, Susan, I said. Mark left. But I need a favor. Can you come to the hospital? I need someone to sign my admission papers so I can get surgery. It won't cost you a penny. I'm on my way, Susan said without hesitation. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She didn't ask about money. She didn't ask about liability. She just came because she cared. When she arrived, Mrs. Higgins explained the situation, leaving out the part about the money for now. Susan signed the papers. I'm just glad you're getting the care you need, Eleanor, she said, holding my hand. Don't worry about Mark. I'm here. Mrs. Higgins took the paperwork. Excellent. Susan, by signing this, you are designated as the primary guardian for this medical event. This activates the insurance. She turned to me. I will process the claim immediately. The surgery is approved. Then she looked at Susan. Also, Susan, because of the specific nature of Mrs. Vance's policy, there is a stipend for the guardian. A check will be mailed to you within 30 days. Susan waved her hand. Oh, honey, I don't need payment to help Eleanor. Mrs. Higgins smiled. It's automatic. You can't refuse it. It's about, let's call it karma. She winked at me. I squeezed Susan's hand. I knew Susan was struggling to pay her property taxes. This money would change her life. And Mark? Mark had thrown it away to save $15,000 he didn't even need. The surgery went perfectly. I woke up in a private room that looked more like a hotel suite than a hospital. There were fresh flowers on the table, sent by Susan, not Mark. I felt weak, but the crushing pain in my chest was gone. For the first time in years, I could breathe deep. I spent 3 days recovering. Mark didn't visit. He didn't call. I checked my phone constantly, a habit I couldn't break, hoping to see his name. Nothing. Susan, on the other hand, was there every day. She brought me magazines, brushed my hair, and told me stories about her grandkids. She was the family I had chosen, while the family I had birthed was absent. On the 4th day, as I was getting ready to be discharged, my phone finally rang. It was Mark. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Mom? You're still alive. His voice wasn't relieved, it was surprised. Yes, Mark. I had the surgery. Wait, surgery? He sounded agitated. I thought you were going to the county hospital. I called them and they said you weren't there. Where are you? I'm at the private cardiac center, I said. The one you left me at. There was a silence on the other end. How? He demanded. Who paid for it? Did you take out a loan against the house? Mom, if you touched my inheritance. It's my house, Mark. I snapped, finding a new backbone. And no, I didn't take a loan. Well, I'm coming down there, Mark said. I need to make sure you haven't done something stupid financially. I'll be there in an hour. He hung up. He wasn't coming to check on my health. He was coming to audit my finances. He was worried that his future inheritance was being spent on keeping me alive. I looked at Mrs. Higgins, who had come in to deliver my discharge papers. He's coming, I told her. He thinks I spent his money. Mrs. Higgins smiled, a shark-like grin. Perfect. I have some unfinished business with him anyway. The billing department needs to close the file on his waiver. What are you going to do? I asked. I'm going to give him a courtesy call, she said. Before he gets here. Mark was driving his brand new Porsche when his phone rang. He saw the hospital area code and answered, assuming it was me again. What now, Mom? This is Mrs. Higgins from the billing department, the voice said coolly. I am calling regarding the account of Eleanor Vance. I told you people, Mark shouted, swerving slightly in traffic. I signed a waiver. I am not paying her bill. Do not ask me for money. I have a signed legal document saying I am not responsible. Yes, sir, we have that document, Mrs. Higgins said, her voice smooth as silk. I am calling to confirm that we have processed your waiver and removed you from the beneficiary list for the policy surplus. Mark slammed on his brakes at a red light. Beneficiary list? What are you talking about? Well, sir, Mrs. Higgins continued, your mother's admission was fully covered by a legacy insurance plan. As you know, these old plans often carry a caregiver indemnity bonus, a cash payout to the family member who signs the responsibility papers. In this case, the surplus amounted to $250,000. Mark felt the blood drain from his face. The cars behind him started honking, but he couldn't move. $250,000, he stammered. Correct, Mrs. Higgins said cheerfully. We called to inform you that since you signed the waiver refusing to be the responsible party, you forfeited this payment. We just wanted to confirm you understood that before we close the file. We wouldn't want you to think we made a mistake. Wait! Mark screamed into the phone. I didn't know. Nobody told me about a bonus. I thought you wanted me to pay. We asked you to sign as the responsible party, Mrs. Higgins said. That is the requirement for the bonus. You refused. You were quite adamant. You said, and I quote, I am not paying a dime. Therefore, the system automatically bypassed you. Who got it? Mark demanded, his voice shaking with rage. Where is that money? The designated responsible party received it, Mrs. Higgins said. A Mrs. Susan Miller signed the admission paperwork. The check was cut this morning. The neighbor. Mark roared. You gave my $250,000 to the neighbor? It wasn't your money, sir. Mrs. Higgins corrected him. It belongs to the caregiver. And you made it very clear you were not the caregiver. Mark hung up the phone and floored the accelerator. He broke every speed limit getting to the hospital. He burst into my room just as I was putting on my coat. His face was purple with rage. He ignored me completely and turned on Mrs. Higgins, who was standing by the window. You scammed me, he shouted, pointing a finger in her face. You tricked me into signing that waiver. You knew there was a payout. Mrs. Higgins didn't flinch. I tricked you, she asked calmly. Sir, I asked you to help your mother. I asked you to cover a deductible to save her life. You refused because it would cost you money. You didn't care if she lived or died, you only cared about your bank account. Now that you know saving her would have made you a profit, suddenly you care. It's fraud. Mark yelled. I'm her son. That money is mine. I'm suing you. I'm suing the hospital. He turned to me. Mom, tell them. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I was stressed. We can fix this. We can get the money back from Susan and split it. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the greed in his eyes, the total lack of love. He wasn't happy I was alive. He was devastated that he had lost a payday. No, Mark, I said quietly. Susan saved my life. You left me to die. You made your choice. Mom, don't be like this, he wheedled, changing his tone to a pathetic whine. It's $200,000. Think of what we could do. I could pay off the boat. We could go on a vacation. I laughed. There is no anymore. You made that clear when you told me to go to the county hospital. I picked up my bag. Susan is taking me home. She's going to use that money to fix her roof and help her grandkids go to college. Money goes to people who deserve it. Mark stood between me and the door. I'm not letting you leave until you sign a paper transferring that money to me. Mrs. Higgins stepped forward. She pressed a button on the wall. Security to room 404, she said into the intercom. We have a hostile visitor. Mark looked at her shocked. You wouldn't. I would, she said. And I'll have the legal team send you a copy of the waiver you signed. It's ironclad, Mr. Vance. You signed away your rights. Now get out of my hospital. 2 large security guards appeared at the door. Mark looked from them to me. He realized he had lost. The money was gone. His reputation in the hospital was destroyed. And his relationship with me was severed. He sneered one last time. Fine. Keep your stupid neighbor. But don't call me when you need help next time. I won't, I said. I have Susan now. And I have money. Mark stormed out, pushed past the guards and disappeared down the hallway. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had spent so many years trying to buy his love, trying to please him. It had taken a heart attack to realize that some hearts are just broken beyond repair. And his was one of them. Susan drove me home. We stopped for ice cream on the way. She was still in shock about the check. "Eleanor, I can't keep this," she said for the 10th time. "It's too much." "You earned it," I told her. "You stepped up when my own blood stepped back. Keep it. Bend it. Enjoy it." When I got home, I changed the locks on my door. I knew Mark well enough to know he might try to come in and look for his inheritance. I also called my lawyer the next morning. I removed Mark from my will. Everything, the house, my savings, my car, was going to a cat shelter and to Susan. A few weeks later, I got a letter from Mark. It wasn't an apology. It was a bill for the gas he used driving to the hospital that day. He was petty to the bitter end. I framed the letter and hung it in my hallway as a reminder that I was free. I ran into Mrs. Higgins at the grocery store a month later. We hugged like old friends. "Did he ever try to sue?" I asked. She laughed. "He tried. No lawyer would take the case once they saw the waiver. He claimed he was under duress. The judge would have laughed him out of court. He's just angry that being selfish finally cost him something." I sit on my porch now with Susan. We drink tea and watch the birds. My heart is strong. My chest doesn't hurt anymore. The surgery fixed the blockage in my arteries, but that day in the hospital fixed the blockage in my life. I cut out the toxicity. Mark still calls sometimes, usually when he needs money. I let it go to voicemail. I listen to his messages, delete them, and go back to my life. He learned a hard lesson that day. The price of greed is high. He tried to save $15,000 and it cost him $250,000. But it cost him something even more valuable. A mother who would have done anything for him. Now he has his boat and I have my peace. And I know which one is worth more. Peace, unfortunately, is often just the calm before another storm. 3 months after the hospital incident, I was gardening with Susan when a sleek black sedan pulled into my driveway. It wasn't Mark's Porsche. It was a process server. A heavy-set man in a cheap suit stepped out and handed me a thick envelope. "Eleanor Vance," he asked. "You've been served." I opened the packet right there among my hydrangeas. The legal jargon was dense, but the bold headers were clear enough. Petition for emergency conservatorship. Mark wasn't just suing for money. He was suing for control. He was claiming that I was mentally incompetent. His filing stated that my decision to give away family assets to a predatory neighbor, Susan, was proof of dementia. He was asking the court to freeze my bank accounts and appoint him as my legal guardian. He wanted to take away my autonomy because he couldn't take my money. I felt my knees shake, not from fear this time but from a cold, hard rage. He was trying to erase me while I was still alive. I went straight to Susan's kitchen table. She read the documents, her face turning pale. "He's calling me a predator," she whispered. "He says I manipulated a senile old woman into signing over insurance fraud proceeds." I slammed my hand on the table. "I am not senile. And it wasn't fraud. It was policy." I called Mrs. Higgins immediately. She answered on the first ring, and when I explained what was happening, her voice turned icy. "He is desperate," she said. "Only a desperate man tries to bury his mother before she's dead. Eleanor, do not panic. This is a standard tactic for children who get cut off. He needs your assets to cover his own debts." I did some digging. Mark's tech startup is under investigation by the SEC. He's drowning and you are his life raft. Hearing that gave me clarity. This wasn't about his concern for my health. It was a robbery in progress. I hired a lawyer Mrs. Higgins recommended, a sharp woman named Miss Sterling, no relation to the appraiser, oddly. We met the next day. "The burden of proof is on him," Miss Sterling explained. "He has to prove you are incapacitated. But Mark has requested an emergency freezing of your assets pending the hearing. That means until the judge rules, you can't access your savings." That was his play. He wanted to starve me out. He knew I lived on a fixed pension. If he froze my accounts, I couldn't pay for a defense. But he forgot one thing, Susan. Susan still had the bulk of the $250,000. She looked at me and said, "I'm paying your legal fees, Eleanor." Every cent. He thinks he can bleed you dry? He's going to find out I have deep pockets now. Mark had handed Susan the very weapon she would use to destroy him. The court date was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Mark launched a smear campaign. He told my distant relatives that I had lost my mind. My cousin from Ohio called me, weeping, asking if I remembered her name. "I'm fine, Linda," I told her. Mark is lying. But the doubt was planted. That is the cruelty of a competency claim. It makes every forgotten key or misplaced glass look like a symptom. I had to submit to a psychological evaluation. It was humiliating. I sat in a sterile office answering questions like, "Who is the president?" and count backwards from 100 by sevens. The doctor, a neutral party appointed by the court, took copious notes. I was terrified that my anger would look like instability. I had to be calm. I had to be perfect. I channeled Mrs. Higgins, cool, collected, and factual. The morning of the hearing, Mark arrived with a team of 3 lawyers. He looked confident, smug even. He probably thought I would show up in my housecoat, looking frail. Instead, I wore my best navy suit, my hair done, standing tall next to Miss Sterling and Susan. Mrs. Higgins was there too, subpoenaed as a witness for our side. Mark took the stand first. He put on a performance worthy of an Oscar. He cried. He wiped away fake tears. "It breaks my heart," he told the judge. "My mother has always been sharp. But after the heart attack, she changed. She became paranoid. She started giving money to strangers. She cut off her only son. I just want to protect her from herself." He painted a picture of a confused, vulnerable old woman being exploited by the evil neighbor Susan. It was a compelling story if you didn't know the truth. Then it was my turn. Mark's lawyer tried to rattle me. "Mrs. Vance, isn't it true you refused financial assistance from your wealthy son?" "No," I said clearly into the microphone. "He refused me. He signed a waiver to avoid paying a $15,000 deductible." Mark's lawyer smirked. "And isn't it true you then gave a $250,000 insurance payout to a neighbor you barely know?" "I didn't give it," I corrected him. "The insurance company awarded it to the designated caregiver. Susan Miller was the caregiver because my son abandoned me at the hospital. The money followed the care." Mark followed the exit sign. A ripple of laughter went through the courtroom. The judge hid a smile behind his hand. Mark's face turned a dangerous shade of red. The climax came when we called Mrs. Higgins to the stand. She walked up with a stack of files. "Mrs. Higgins," Miss Sterling asked, "can you verify the nature of the transaction regarding the $250,000? "Absolutely," Mrs. Higgins said, adjusting her glasses. "It is a standard indemnity clause payout. Mr. Vance was offered the opportunity to sign as the responsible party. He declined. He signed a waiver stating he had no financial interest in his mother's care." She pulled out a document. "I also have the call log from the day he found out about the money. He threatened to sue the hospital. He called his mother a bad investment previously. This is not a man concerned about his mother's mental health. This is a man upset that he signed away a winning lottery ticket." The judge leaned forward, looking at the waiver. Mark slumped in his chair, his narrative crumbling brick by brick. Miss Sterling then played her ace. "Your Honor, we also have financial records regarding Mr. Vance's current standing." Mark's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. Irrelevant." "It goes to motive, Your Honor," Miss Sterling argued. "If Mr. Vance is petitioning for control of his mother's assets, we must know why." The judge overruled the objection. Miss Sterling presented the evidence Mrs. Higgins had hinted at. Mr. Vance is currently $3 million in debt. His boat is in foreclosure. His company is facing a solvency crisis. He isn't trying to conserve his mother's estate. He is trying to liquidate it to cover his own failures. The courtroom went silent. Everyone looked at Mark. He wasn't the concerned son anymore. He was a vulture circling a healthy animal, hoping it would die. The judge didn't take long to rule. He looked at Mark with undisguised disgust. "Mr. Vance, this petition is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I find this filing to be frivolous and malicious." He turned to me. "Mrs. Vance, you seem to be perfectly capable of managing your own affairs. In fact, you seem sharper than your son. I am ordering Mr. Vance to pay all legal fees for both parties, the judge continued. And I am issuing a temporary restraining order. You are to stay away from your mother and Mrs. Miller. You are not to contact them, nor come within 500 feet of their properties. Mark stood up, his face pale. But I can't pay the fees. My accounts are. That is not my problem, the judge said, echoing Mark's own words from the hospital. You're an adult. Figure it out. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. Felt like the ending of a movie. Mark was arguing with his lawyers on the steps, who were likely firing him since he couldn't pay them. I didn't even look at him. I walked straight to Susan and Mrs. Higgins. Lunch is on me, I said. We're going to the most expensive place in town. Mrs. Higgins laughed. I can't, dear. I have to get back to the hospital. There might be another ungrateful child I need to deal with. She winked and walked away. A superhero in sensible shoes. Susan and I watched her go. She's terrifying, Susan said. She's wonderful, I replied. The fallout for Mark was swift. Without access to my assets, his house of cards collapsed. The news of the failed conservatorship hit the local business journals. Investors pulled out of his startup. His boat was repossessed a week later. I heard from a friend that he had to sell his Porsche and was moving into a small apartment downtown. He tried to call me one last time from a blocked number. Mom, I'm going to lose the house. I'm going to be homeless. I listened for a moment, feeling a phantom ache in my chest where my motherly instinct used to be. But then I remembered the hospital room. I remembered the waiver. There is a shelter on 5th Street, I said calmly. They have a job placement program. It might be good for you to build some character. I hung up. It wasn't cruelty. It was the consequences he had ordered for himself. 2 years later, my life is unrecognizable from the lonely existence I had before the heart attack. Susan and I travel together now. We use some of the insurance money to take a cruise to Alaska. I send postcards to Mrs. Higgins from every port. I updated my living will. My assets are set up in a trust to benefit a foundation that helps seniors pay for medical care when their families abandon them. It's called the Eleanor Project. I want to make sure no one else has to beg a child for their life. I look at my reflection in the mirror, and I don't see a victim. I see a survivor. I lost a son, yes. But I gained a sister in Susan, a guardian angel in Mrs. Higgins, and most importantly, I regained my own dignity. And that is a wealth Mark will never understand.